Marcus Rodriguez pressed his back against the cold metal security gate, his weathered hands gripping the modified baseball bat that had become his most trusted companion over the past 18 months since the world ended. The familiar weight of his Marine Corps dog tags clinked softly against his chest as he surveyed the desperate scene before him in the abandoned Riverside shopping mall. Dawn's pale light filtered through the grimy skylights above, casting long shadows across the debris-strewn upper level where he and his makeshift family of survivors had made their final stand. Dr. Emily Watson crouched beside him, her surgeon's hand steady as she checked the bandages on Samuel Turner's wounded leg. The elderly engineer had taken a nasty fall during their last supply run, and his mobility was now severely compromised at the worst possible time. The bleeding stopped, but he needs proper rest and antibiotics, Emily whispered, her voice barely audible above the growing chorus of moans and shuffling feet echoing from the lower level. Her medical bag, once pristine and organized, now contained a hodgepodge of scavenged supplies and improvised instruments that she'd become expert at using in the most dire circumstances. Jake Thompson hunched over his collection of salvaged electronics, his 19-year-old fingers flying across a jury-rigged tablet as he monitored the mall's failing security systems. The kid had been a computer science student before the outbreak, but 18 months of survival had transformed him into a technical wizard capable of breathing life into any piece of abandoned technology. "The motion sensors on level 1 are going crazy," he reported, his voice cracking with exhaustion and fear. "I count at least 300 signatures down there, maybe more. They're spreading out through the entire lower concourse." Rebecca Martinez adjusted the tactical vest she'd salvaged from her old police station, checking her ammunition count for the third time in 10 minutes. Her dark eyes reflected the hard-earned wisdom of someone who had seen society collapse firsthand and refused to let despair consume her. As a former patrol officer, she understood crowd control and tactical positioning, skills that had kept this group alive longer than most. "The jewelry store barricade won't hold much longer," she announced grimly, pointing toward the makeshift fortress of overturned tables, shopping carts, and metal grating they'd constructed around the old K Jewelers. "Those things have been pushing against it all night. The supports are starting to buckle." Samuel Turner struggled to his feet despite Emily's protests, his engineer's mind still sharp even as his body failed him. At 72 he was the oldest member of their group, but his decades of experience with structural systems and mechanical engineering had proven invaluable in fortifying their temporary home. "The backup generator in the basement has been running on fumes for weeks," he said, his voice hoarse but determined. "Without regular maintenance and fresh fuel, I'd say we have maybe 6 hours of power left, 8 if we're lucky. Once those security doors lose power, our perimeter becomes meaningless." Marcus felt the familiar knot of responsibility tighten in his stomach as he processed the tactical situation. These 4 people had become more than just fellow survivors over the past 8 months they'd been together. They were his family, his mission, his reason for continuing to fight when everything seemed hopeless. His military training screamed at him to assess their assets and options with cold, clinical precision, but his heart made every decision personal and desperately important. The mall had seemed like salvation when they'd first discovered it 3 months ago. Multiple exits, elevated position, existing security infrastructure, and enough retail space to scavenge supplies for months. They'd systematically cleared each store, barricaded the entrances, and established routines that gave them a semblance of normal life in an abnormal world. Jake had managed to get some of the security cameras working. Emily had set up a medical station in the old Radio Shack. Becca had organized their weapons and ammunition in the former Spencer's gift shop, and Sam had worked tirelessly to maintain their generator and water systems. But now, as Marcus watched the security monitors flicker with images of countless undead figures pressing against their defenses from every angle, he realized their sanctuary had become their tomb. The zombies had found them, drawn perhaps by the generator's noise or the scent of living humans, and their numbers were overwhelming. The creatures showed no signs of losing interest or moving on. If anything, more seemed to arrive with each passing hour, attracted by the sounds of the growing horde. "We need to make a decision," Marcus announced, his command voice cutting through the morning stillness. "We can try to reinforce our position and wait them out, or we execute the evacuation plan we discussed last month." He gestured toward their modified school bus in the parking garage below, barely visible through the security monitors. The vehicle represented both hope and terror, their potential escape route and possibly their final gamble with death. Emily finished securing Sam's bandages and looked up with determined eyes. "If we stay, we're betting everything on those barricades holding and the generator lasting longer than expected. If we run, we're betting everything on reaching that bus and making it out of the parking garage alive." She paused, her medical training making her acutely aware of the odds they faced either way. Either choice could get us all killed, but at least running gives us some control over our fate. The sound of splintering wood echoed from below as another section of their barricade gave way, and Marcus knew their time for debate had run out. The crash of their jewelry store barricade collapsing sent a shockwave of adrenaline through Marcus's body as he watched dozens of zombies pour through the breach on his security monitor. Their moans grew louder, more unified, creating a horrifying symphony that seemed to vibrate through the mall's steel framework. "That's it, we're moving now," he commanded, shouldering his military surplus backpack loaded with their most essential supplies. The decision had been made for them by circumstances beyond their control, and every second of hesitation now meant a smaller chance of survival. Jake's fingers flew across his makeshift control panel as he initiated their desperate gambit. "Activating PA system diversion in 3, 2, 1, he announced, his voice steady despite the terror in his eyes. Throughout the mall, speakers crackled to life with a cacophony of recorded sounds he'd prepared for exactly this scenario: car alarms, police sirens, and gunshots that he'd mixed together into an audio chaos designed to confuse and misdirect the zombie horde. The immediate effect was visible on the security cameras as clusters of undead creatures turned away from their position, shambling toward the phantom sounds echoing from the opposite end of the mall. Rebecca took point position, her police training evident in every measured step as she led them toward the maintenance corridor that would take them to the parking garage. Her service weapon was drawn but held low, knowing that gunfire would only attract more attention to their location. "Stay close, stay quiet, and trust my signals," she whispered over her shoulder, her eyes constantly scanning for threats as they navigated through the maze of abandoned storefronts and overturned kiosks that had become their familiar neighborhood over the past 3 months. Emily supported Samuel's weight as they moved, the elderly engineer's wounded leg forcing him to lean heavily on her shoulder. Despite her petite frame, months of survival had strengthened her beyond what her previous life as a trauma surgeon had required. She could feel Sam's labored breathing and knew his pain was considerable, but his determination to keep pace with the group never wavered. "The service elevator is just ahead," she murmured encouragingly, knowing that stairs would be nearly impossible for him in his current condition. Marcus brought up the rear, his modified baseball bat ready and his eyes constantly checking their 6 o'clock position. His Marine training had taught him that retreating forces were most vulnerable when they focused entirely on their destination and forgot about pursuit. Through the distant speakers, Jake's audio diversion continued to echo through the mall, but Marcus could already see zombies beginning to lose interest in the phantom sounds and returning to their original search patterns. The maintenance corridor felt like a tunnel through hell as they navigated past broken vending machines and scattered debris. Emergency lighting cast eerie red shadows on the walls, and the air was thick with the smell of decay and abandonment. Samuel stumbled, nearly taking Emily down with him, but caught himself against the wall with a grunt of pain. "Keep going," he insisted through gritted teeth. "I'm not slowing us down now, not after everything we've been through together." Jake's tablet showed their bus was still secure in the parking garage, but the route to reach it was becoming increasingly dangerous as zombies filtered back toward the lower level. "The audio diversion bought us maybe 10 minutes, he reported, his voice tight with concentration. "But they're spreading out again and some of them are definitely heading toward the garage entrance." Rebecca reached the service elevator first and punched the call button, her heart sinking as nothing happened. The elevator was dead, another victim of their failing power systems. "Stairs it is," she announced grimly, knowing this would be their most vulnerable moment. The stairwell was narrow, offering no escape routes if they encountered zombies coming up from below, and Samuel's injury would make their descent slow and noisy. Emily's medical training kicked in as she assessed their options. "Sam, I need you to let me know the moment the pain becomes unbearable. We can't afford to have you collapse halfway down." She quickly injected him with a small dose of morphine from her dwindling medical supplies, knowing it would help with the pain but also make him slightly unsteady. It was a calculated risk in a situation where every choice carried potentially fatal consequences. Marcus checked his watch and realized they'd been moving for only 12 minutes, though it felt like hours. "Jake, kill the audio diversion. We need every zombie possible focused on those sounds while we make our move to the bus." The sudden silence that followed was almost more terrifying than the previous chaos, broken only by their own breathing and the distant sounds of zombie movement throughout the mall. The stairwell descent became a carefully orchestrated dance of survival. Rebecca descended first, clearing each landing before signaling the others to advance. Emily and Samuel moved together, taking each step slowly but steadily, while Jake monitored their security feeds on his tablet to track zombie movement patterns. Marcus maintained rear guard, ready to make a stand if they were discovered and pursued. Halfway down, they heard the unmistakable sound of their upper-level barricades finally giving way completely. The crash of overturned tables and shopping carts echoed through the building, followed by an increase in zombie activity that Jake could track on his remaining cameras. "They're flooding our old position," he whispered, "but most of them are still focused on the upper level. We might actually make this work." The parking garage door loomed ahead, their modified school bus visible through the reinforced glass windows. Marcus felt a surge of hope mixed with dread, knowing that reaching the vehicle was only the beginning of their escape attempt. Starting the engine would create noise that would attract every zombie in the immediate area, and their route out of the garage would take them directly past the mall's main entrances where hundreds of undead creatures waited in the morning sunlight. The armored school bus rumbled to a stop at the crest of Pine Ridge Hill, its engine finally falling silent after 6 hours of desperate driving through zombie-infested back roads and abandoned highways. Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he surveyed the military checkpoints spread out before them, his experienced eyes taking in details that filled him with both hope and concern. The compound was extensive, surrounded by 12-foot chain-link fencing topped with razor wire, watchtowers positioned at strategic intervals, and multiple buildings that suggested a significant military presence had once called this place home. Rebecca stepped out of the bus first, her police instincts immediately alert to the eerie silence that surrounded the abandoned facility. "This place should have sentries, patrols, some kind of activity," she observed, her hand resting unconsciously on her sidearm. The main gate stood slightly ajar, unusual for a military installation, and she could see scattered equipment and personal belongings littering the ground near the guard station. Something made them leave in a hurry. Jake powered up his tablet and began scanning for electronic signatures within the compound. "I'm picking up active power sources," he reported with growing excitement, "and what looks like a functioning communication array on the main building. If the radio equipment is still operational, we might be able to contact other survivor groups, maybe even find out what happened here." His teenage optimism was infectious, but Marcus noticed the kids' hands were shaking slightly from exhaustion and the adrenaline crash following their harrowing escape. Emily helped Samuel down from the bus, her medical assessment noting that his condition had stabilized during the journey despite the rough roads and constant stress. "The morphine is wearing off, but the swelling in his leg has gone down," she announced, her professional demeanor masking her own exhaustion. "If this place has a proper medical facility, I can do a thorough examination and maybe find some real antibiotics." The prospect of working in an actual medical environment again, rather than makeshift field conditions, was almost too good to hope for. Samuel leaned heavily on his improvised crutch, but his engineer's eyes were already assessing the compound's infrastructure with professional interest. "Look at those solar panels on the communications building," he pointed out, his voice gaining strength despite his physical limitations. "And those are military-grade backup generators in that concrete housing. Whoever designed this place built it to operate independently for extended periods. If the systems are still functional, we're looking at hot showers, refrigeration, and reliable power for the first time in months." Marcus led the group through the open gate, his military training evident in how he moved through the potentially hostile environment. Every step was calculated, every corner checked before advancing, his modified baseball bat ready despite the apparent abandonment of the facility. The main administration building's door was unlocked, revealing an interior that spoke of hasty evacuation rather than organized withdrawal. Personal items were scattered across desks, coffee cups still sat beside computer terminals, and classified documents were strewn across the floor as if someone had been gathering intelligence in extreme haste. The communication center was a treasure trove of equipment that made Jake's eyes light up with possibilities. Multiple radio systems, satellite uplinks, computer servers, and monitoring equipment filled the room in organized chaos. "This is incredible," he breathed, his fingers already exploring the control panels and testing system responses. "With this setup, I could potentially contact survivor groups hundreds of miles away, maybe even reach government facilities if any are still operational." Emily discovered the medical facility in the compound's west wing, and her surgeon's heart raced at the sight of proper operating equipment, medicine cabinets stocked with real pharmaceuticals, and diagnostic tools she hadn't seen since the outbreak began. "This is better equipped than some civilian hospitals I've worked in," she announced over the radio Jake had given each team member. "I could perform actual surgery here if necessary, not just field medicine and wound care." Rebecca's exploration of the armory revealed why the compound had been abandoned so suddenly. Weapon racks stood mostly empty, ammunition boxes were overturned and scattered, and the heavy blast door showed signs of forced entry from the inside. They were overrun, she reported grimly, but not by zombies. These impact patterns on the walls, the way the weapons were taken, this looks more like human combat. Military versus military, or maybe the civilian population turning against their protectors when resources got scarce. Samuel's investigation of the power systems brought welcome news mixed with concerning observations. The solar array is functioning at about 60% capacity, and I count 3 operational generators with fuel supplies that should last us several months, he announced. But the security systems show signs of deliberate sabotage. Someone wanted to make sure this place couldn't be defended effectively, which suggests they might come back to claim it. As evening approached, the group gathered in the communications center where Jake had managed to establish contact with several other survivor communities. The static-filled voices emerging from the radio speakers represented the first human contact they'd had with the outside world in months, but the conversations revealed a disturbing pattern. Communities were being systematically attacked and absorbed by larger, more aggressive groups that demanded tribute and submission in exchange for protection. Marcus studied the tactical maps spread across the communications center's main table, noting the locations of friendly survivor groups and the expanding territories controlled by hostile factions. "We found sanctuary," he announced to his exhausted family, "but we're not safe yet. These radio intercepts suggest that our location won't remain secret for long, and we need to decide whether we're going to defend this place or use it as a temporary base while we search for something more permanent." The compound offered them everything they'd been desperately seeking: power, medical facilities, weapons, communication equipment, and defensible positions. But the evidence of violent conflict and the intelligence gathered from radio communications made it clear that their fight for survival was far from over, and that human enemies might prove even more dangerous than the zombie hordes they'd escaped. Jake's fingers moved across the radio controls with growing confidence as he fine-tuned the frequency settings, 3 days of constant experimentation having transformed him from amateur operator to skilled communications specialist. The communications center had become his domain, banks of monitors displaying signal strength readings and frequency analyses that would have been incomprehensible to him before the outbreak. Static crackled through the speakers as he locked onto a strong signal broadcasting from approximately 200 miles northeast of their position, the voice that emerged clear and authoritative despite the distance. "This is Haven Valley Control, Colonel David Harrison commanding. We're a secure community of over 300 survivors with established agriculture, manufacturing capabilities, and organized defense forces. Any legitimate survivor groups seeking sanctuary are welcome to apply for admission through proper channels." The transmission repeated every hour on multiple frequencies, professional and reassuring in a way that reminded Marcus of his military days when competent leadership meant the difference between mission success and catastrophe. Emily leaned over Jake's shoulder, studying the detailed maps he'd been creating based on radio intercepts and survivor reports. "Haven Valley sounds almost too good to be true," she observed, her medical training making her naturally cautious about claims that seemed too perfect. 300 people means they need significant resources, advanced planning, and either incredible luck or something we don't know about. She traced potential routes on the map with her finger, noting the numerous obstacles and danger zones between their current position and the promised sanctuary. Samuel had spent the morning working on their bus modifications, his engineering expertise focused on transforming their vehicle into a mobile fortress capable of surviving the dangerous journey ahead. "I've reinforced the armor plating around the engine compartment and fuel tank," he reported, his leg injury much improved thanks to Emily's medical care and the compound's pharmaceutical supplies. "Added mesh screening over the windows that'll stop grasping hands but still allow visibility, and I'm working on a ram attachment for the front bumper in case we need to push through obstacles." Rebecca studied intelligence reports she'd compiled from various radio transmissions, her police background making her skilled at pattern recognition and threat assessment. "The Reapers aren't just raiders," she announced grimly, spreading photographs and notes across the communications table. "They're operating like a paramilitary organization with coordinated attacks, intelligence gathering, and systematic territory expansion. Their leader, Vincent Cross, was apparently a mercenary before the outbreak, and he's building something that looks more like a feudal empire than a survival community." Marcus absorbed this information while monitoring the perimeter through the compound's restored security cameras, his marine instincts troubled by intercepted Reaper communications that suggested they were being watched. "Cross has been monitoring radio traffic systematically," he observed, pointing to coded references in the intelligence reports. "Every time a new survivor group makes contact with Haven Valley, the Reapers seem to know about it within hours. They're either monitoring our communications or they have sources inside the communities they're tracking. The afternoon brought a direct contact that changed everything. Jake's excited voice echoed through the compound's intercom system as he announced, "I've got Colonel Harrison on a secure channel, and he wants to speak with our group leader personally." Marcus hurried to the communications center, his heart pounding with a mixture of hope and suspicion as he prepared for the conversation that could determine their future. Colonel Harrison's voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to command in crisis situations. "Marcus Rodriguez, I presume? Your technical specialist provided your basic information, and I have to say, your group's survival record is impressive. 18 months in the field with 0 casualties is nearly unprecedented in our experience." The praise felt genuine, but Marcus detected underlying caution in the colonel's tone that suggested this conversation was as much an evaluation as an invitation. "Haven Valley offers everything we've promised," Harrison continued, "but admission requires a dangerous journey and absolute commitment to our community standards. We've learned that half-hearted members become security risks when resources get scarce or difficult decisions need to be made. Are you prepared to make that level of commitment to something you've never seen?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications about trust, loyalty, and the price of sanctuary in a world where betrayal meant death. Marcus felt the weight of decision-making for his entire family as he considered their options. "Colonel, we're willing to make the journey and evaluate Haven Valley personally, but we need honest information about the risks involved. Our intelligence suggests the Reapers are actively hunting groups trying to reach your location." He paused, studying the faces of his companions who had gathered around the radio. "What can you tell us about their capabilities and whether you're able to provide any support during our transit?" The colonel's response revealed both the extent of Haven Valley's resources and the deadly nature of their situation. "We maintain several safe houses along the primary routes, and we can coordinate with other survivor groups to provide mutual support during transit. However, Cross has been systematically eliminating our way stations and corrupting our communications, which means any journey to Haven Valley is essentially a running battle from start to finish." Jake interrupted with urgent technical information. "I'm detecting signal analysis equipment trying to triangulate our position," he announced, his voice tight with concern. "Someone with sophisticated gear is actively hunting for our transmission source, and they're getting closer to pinpointing our location." The implication was clear. Their conversation with Haven Valley had attracted unwanted attention, and their sanctuary was no longer secret. Marcus made the decision that would define their next chapter of survival. "Colonel Harrison, we're accepting your invitation and beginning transit preparations immediately. Our position has been compromised and staying here is no longer an option." He looked around at his family, seeing determination mixed with fear in their faces. "We'll monitor your safe house frequencies and coordinate our movement with any other groups making the journey. This conversation ends now for operational security." As Jake powered down the radio equipment, the compound fell into a tense silence broken only by the distant sounds of Samuel working on their bus modifications. They had found hope in Haven Valley's promise, but that hope came with the price of a 50-mile journey through territory controlled by enemies who had made hunting survivors their specialty. The modified school bus roared to life in the pre-dawn darkness, its reinforced engine growling with power as Marcus tested the vehicle's new capabilities one final time before their departure. Samuel's engineering modifications had transformed their escape vehicle into a formidable mobile fortress, complete with steel plating welded over vulnerable areas, reinforced ram bars extending from the front bumper, and mesh screening that could withstand grasping zombie hands while maintaining visibility for the driver. The fuel tanks had been expanded and armored, carrying enough diesel to reach Haven Valley without requiring dangerous refueling stops in hostile territory. Rebecca checked their weapons inventory as the others loaded their essential supplies, her police training evident in how she organized ammunition, medical supplies, and emergency equipment for maximum accessibility during crisis situations. "We've got enough firepower to handle moderate resistance," she reported, securing rifles and improvised weapon racks Samuel had constructed along the bus's interior walls. "But if we run into serious trouble, our best option is speed and mobility rather than sustained combat." Her tactical assessment was grimly realistic, acknowledging their limitations while emphasizing their strengths. Emily finished packing her expanded medical kit, the compound's pharmaceutical supplies having allowed her to create a field hospital capable of handling serious trauma cases. "I've prepared for everything from gunshot wounds to severe zombie bites," she announced, though her voice carried the weight of someone who hoped desperately that such preparations would prove unnecessary. The morphine and antibiotics we found here could mean the difference between life and death if anyone gets seriously injured during the journey. Jake loaded his communications equipment into a specially protected compartment, his technical setup now including portable radio gear, signal jammers, and electronic countermeasures designed to prevent the Reapers from tracking their movement. "I'll maintain radio silence except for emergency communications with Haven Valley's safe houses," he explained, his teenage confidence bolstered by 3 days of intensive practice with military-grade equipment. "But I can monitor Reaper communications and give us advance warning if they're coordinating attacks in our area." The first leg of their journey took them through abandoned suburban neighborhoods where nature was already beginning to reclaim human civilization. Vines crawled up the sides of empty houses, weeds pushed through sidewalk cracks, and rusted cars sat in driveways like monuments to a world that no longer existed. Marcus navigated carefully around obstacles while scanning for signs of human activity, knowing that occupied buildings could contain either friendly survivors or hostile scavengers looking to prey on traveling groups. Their route planning had identified several critical waypoints based on Haven Valley's intelligence reports and Jake's analysis of survivor radio traffic. The first major challenge came 20 miles into their journey when they reached the collapsed Interstate 94 bridge that forced all eastbound traffic through the zombie-infested ruins of Millbrook City. Samuel studied their options through binoculars while Emily treated a minor cut Rebecca had sustained while scouting their approach routes. "The main street through downtown is completely blocked by abandoned vehicles," Samuel reported, his engineering background helping him assess structural damage and potential passage routes. "But there's a service road along the old railroad tracks that might get us through if we can clear some debris." The detour would add hours to their journey and take them through territory where zombie density was significantly higher, but the alternative was backtracking 30 miles and attempting a more dangerous river crossing. Jake's monitoring equipment detected Reaper radio chatter as they prepared to enter the city ruins, coded communications that suggested hostile forces were tracking multiple survivor groups in the region. "They're coordinating something big," he warned, his voice tight with concern as he decoded the military-style transmissions. "Multiple teams, coordinated timing, and they keep mentioning package interception, which probably means us." The intelligence confirmed their worst fears about Reaper capabilities and suggested that their journey was expected and potentially anticipated. The passage through Millbrook became a nightmarish game of cat and mouse as they navigated between abandoned vehicles while zombies emerged from buildings and side streets in growing numbers. Marcus drove with steady precision, using the bus's reinforced ram to push aside obstacles while Rebecca provided covering fire through specially designed gun ports. The sound of their engine and the crash of metal against metal attracted more undead attention, creating a growing parade of zombies that followed their progress through the city. Halfway through the urban wasteland, they encountered their first human contact of the journey, a family of 4 trapped in a gas station convenience store, surrounded by zombies and running low on supplies. Emily's medical training immediately identified signs of malnutrition and exhaustion, while Rebecca's tactical assessment revealed that the family had been defending their position for several days against increasing zombie pressure. Marcus faced a critical decision that would define their group's character and mission. Rescuing the family would require exposing their bus to additional danger, using precious ammunition, and adding 4 more people to their limited resources. But abandoning fellow survivors violated every principle that had kept their own group together through 18 months of crisis. "We're not leaving them," he announced, his command voice cutting through any potential debate. "Sam, can you get us positioned for a rescue without compromising our escape route?" The rescue operation became a carefully orchestrated dance of violence and mercy as Rebecca and Marcus fought their way into the gas station while Emily prepared to treat the family's injuries and Jake maintained communications with Haven Valley's nearest safe house. The family, parents David and Lisa Chen with their 2 young children, had been traveling toward Haven Valley when their vehicle broke down, leaving them stranded in zombie-infested territory with minimal supplies and deteriorating hope. As they loaded the rescued family onto their bus, Marcus realized that their mission had evolved from simple survival to something larger and more meaningful. They were no longer just trying to reach safety, they were becoming the kind of people who created safety for others, even at significant personal risk. The weight of leadership felt heavier but also more purposeful as their expanded group continued eastward through increasingly dangerous territory, knowing that both human and zombie enemies awaited them in the wasteland ahead. The morning sun cast long shadows across the rolling hills of rural Pennsylvania as their armored bus crested the final ridge before Haven Valley, the promised sanctuary now visible in the distance through a haze of morning mist. Marcus felt a surge of hope as he studied the organized settlement through binoculars, defensive walls, cultivated fields, solar panel arrays, and the unmistakable signs of a thriving community that had not just survived but actually prospered in the aftermath of civilization's collapse. The Chen family pressed against the windows in amazement, their children seeing their first glimpse of safety after days of terror and uncertainty. Jake's communications equipment crackled with welcoming transmissions from Haven Valley's control center, Colonel Harrison's voice clear and reassuring as he provided final approach coordinates and security protocols. "You're cleared for entry through Gate 7, the colonel announced, his professional tone carrying undertones of genuine relief. "Our scouts report your position, and you should reach our perimeter in approximately 30 minutes. Medical teams are standing by to assist with your rescued civilians." Rebecca maintained her vigilance despite their proximity to safety, her police instincts warning her that the final miles of any dangerous journey often prove the most treacherous. "Something feels wrong," she announced, studying the landscape ahead through her rifle scope. "The approach route is too quiet, too empty. If Haven Valley maintains regular patrols and security sweeps, we should be seeing some kind of activity by now." Her tactical experience had taught her to trust those moments when reality didn't match expectations, especially when survival depended on recognizing threats before they became fatal. Samuel monitored their vehicle systems while keeping watch for mechanical problems that could strand them within sight of their destination. "Engine temperature is running slightly high from the extended drive, but we should make it without problems," he reported, his engineering background evident in how he continuously assessed potential failure points. "The fuel reserves are lower than I'd like, but we've got enough to reach the gate and maybe make an emergency retreat if necessary." Emily tended to Lisa Chen's youngest daughter, who had developed a fever during their journey and required constant medical attention. "Her temperature is stabilizing, but she needs proper medical facilities and antibiotics that I can't provide in the field," Emily explained to the worried parents. Getting her to Haven Valley's medical center is now a critical priority, not just a hopeful destination. The added pressure of caring for a sick child had intensified everyone's desire to reach safety quickly, but it also made them more vulnerable to making desperate decisions. The ambush came without warning as their bus rounded a curve in the mountain road, a carefully planned killing ground that demonstrated the Reaper's military expertise and ruthless efficiency. Explosions erupted on both sides of their vehicle as improvised explosive devices disabled their escape routes, while automatic gunfire raked their armored plating from concealed positions in the surrounding forest. Marcus fought to maintain control as their right rear tire exploded, sending the bus into a dangerous skid that nearly sent them over the steep embankment. Vincent Cross's voice boomed through a military-grade loudspeaker system as armed figures emerged from camouflage positions throughout the ambush zone. "Marcus Rodriguez and company, you're surrounded by superior firepower and have nowhere to run. Surrender immediately and we might let some of you live long enough to join our organization." The Reaper leader's confidence was evident in his casual tone, as if their capture was merely a routine business transaction rather than a life-or-death confrontation. Rebecca immediately assessed their tactical situation while Jake tried desperately to establish emergency contact with Haven Valley's security forces. "We've got at least 20 hostiles in prepared positions," she reported grimly, "with automatic weapons, explosives, and high ground advantage. Our armor will protect us for a few minutes, but they can disable our mobility and wait us out." The professional quality of the ambush revealed that Cross had been planning this specific interception for days, possibly since their radio communications had been detected. Marcus realized that conventional defensive tactics would only delay their inevitable capture or death, forcing him to consider desperate alternatives that went against his military training. "Sam, can you get the engine running long enough to ram through their roadblock?" he asked, knowing that such a maneuver would expose them to concentrated fire while attempting to break through prepared obstacles. "We're not surrendering to these people, and we're not letting them capture the Chen family." The children's terrified crying filled the bus as their parents tried to shield them from the sounds of gunfire and shouting outside, while Emily prepared her medical supplies for the casualties she knew were coming. David Chen, despite his own fear, attempted to help by organizing their limited ammunition supplies and checking weapon conditions. "What do you need us to do?" he asked Marcus, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "We're not fighters, but we won't just hide while you risk everything to protect us." Jake's communications breakthrough came at the critical moment when their situation seemed hopeless. "I've got Haven Valley security on emergency frequency," he announced with desperate relief. "Multiple units responding to our distress signal, estimated arrival time 12 minutes. The promise of reinforcements changed their tactical equation from hopeless last stand to desperate holding action, but 12 minutes might as well have been 12 hours when facing overwhelming enemy firepower. Samuel managed to restart their damaged engine despite the mechanical trauma from the explosions, but warned that their mobility was severely compromised. "I can give you one chance to break through their lines," he announced, "but the engine will probably fail completely within a few minutes of full acceleration." The bus lurched forward as Marcus made his decision, choosing action over surrender while Rebecca provided covering fire and Emily braced for the impact that would determine whether they lived to see Haven Valley or died within sight of salvation. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. The roar of heavy vehicles approaching at high speed cut through the gunfire as Haven Valley's security forces arrived with military precision that surprised even Marcus's experienced expectations. 3 armored personnel carriers and 2 modified pickup trucks crested the hill behind the Reaper positions, their sudden appearance transforming the ambush site from a carefully planned trap into a chaotic battlefield where Vincent Cross's forces found themselves caught between 2 enemy groups. Colonel Harrison's voice crackled through Jake's radio with calm authority that contrasted sharply with the violence erupting around them. "Rodriguez, keep your heads down and maintain your position. We've got this situation contained." The colonel's military efficiency was evident as Haven Valley forces deployed with coordinated precision, establishing firing positions and escape routes while systematically dismantling the Reaper ambush through superior tactics and firepower. Rebecca watched through her rifle scope as professional soldiers moved with the kind of disciplined aggression that reminded her why organized communities like Haven Valley had survived while chaotic raider groups eventually destroyed themselves through internal conflict and poor planning. Vincent Cross's confident demeanor evaporated as his carefully planned operation collapsed around him, his voice now carrying desperation rather than authority as he attempted to rally his scattered forces through their communications system. "Fall back to secondary positions and establish defensive perimeter," he commanded, but Marcus could hear the panic beneath his professional tone. The Reaper leader had clearly expected an easy victory against a single bus of refugees, not a coordinated counterattack by military-trained defenders who knew the terrain and had planned for exactly this scenario. Emily worked frantically to stabilize Rebecca, who had taken a bullet through her shoulder during the initial moments of the firefight when she'd exposed herself to provide covering fire for their escape attempt. "The wound missed major arteries, but she's losing blood faster than I can control in these conditions," Emily reported while applying pressure bandages and preparing emergency medical supplies. "I need to get her to proper surgical facilities within the next hour, or we're looking at serious complications from blood loss and potential infection." Jake's monitoring equipment revealed crucial intelligence about the Reaper organization that changed everyone's understanding of the threat they represented. "I'm intercepting communications between Cross and someone called Overwatch," he announced while ducking to avoid stray gunfire. "They've got detailed information about Haven Valley's patrol schedules, defensive positions and security protocols. This wasn't just a random ambush, they knew exactly when and where we'd be traveling, which means they have inside intelligence from someone within the community." Samuel kept their damaged bus operational through sheer determination and engineering expertise, but warned that their vehicle was rapidly approaching complete mechanical failure. "The engine's overheating, we've lost hydraulic pressure in the steering system, and the transmission is making sounds that suggest imminent breakdown," he reported while monitoring multiple system failures. "We need to evacuate to one of the Haven Valley vehicles immediately, because this bus won't be driving anywhere much longer." The tactical situation shifted dramatically when Colonel Harrison's forces captured 3 Reaper operatives during their counterattack, leading to the discovery of encrypted communication devices and detailed intelligence files about Haven Valley's internal operations. Marcus listened as the colonel interrogated the prisoners, his military experience helping him recognize the significance of the intelligence breach that had enabled the ambush. "These aren't just raiders," Harrison explained grimly. "They've got military-grade equipment, professional training, and most importantly, they know things about our community that should only be available to residents with security clearance." David Chin proved his worth during the firefight by using his civilian engineering background to identify structural weaknesses in the Reaper defensive positions, information that Haven Valley forces used to coordinate flanking maneuvers that broke the enemy resistance. "The old bridge supports they're using for cover won't withstand concentrated fire on the eastern foundation points," he advised through Jake's radio system. "If you can position forces to target those specific areas, their entire defensive line will collapse." His contribution demonstrated how even non-combat specialists could provide valuable tactical advantages when their expertise was properly utilized. The interrogation of captured Reapers revealed the existence of a traitor within Haven Valley's leadership structure, someone with access to patrol schedules, security protocols, and communication frequencies who had been feeding intelligence to Vincent Cross's organization for several weeks. Colonel Harrison's face darkened as he processed the implications of this betrayal, knowing that the community's survival depended on absolute trust and mutual cooperation among its members. "We've got a serious security breach that goes all the way to the top of our organization," he admitted to Marcus. "Someone we trusted with our lives has been selling information to people who want to destroy everything we've built." The battle's conclusion came when Vincent Cross himself was wounded and captured during a desperate attempt to escape through the forest, his injuries severe enough to require immediate medical attention that only Haven Valley's facilities could provide. Emily found herself in the uncomfortable position of treating the man who had tried to kill her and her family, her medical oath compelling her to provide care despite her personal feelings about his actions. "He's stable enough for transport, but he needs surgery within the next few hours," she reported, her professional demeanor masking the internal conflict between her duty as a healer and her desire for justice. As they prepared to evacuate toward Haven Valley's safety, Marcus realized that their arrival would bring both hope and danger to the community that had offered them sanctuary. The intelligence about the internal traitor meant that their new home was compromised from within, while the capture of Vincent Cross might provoke retaliation from other Reaper cells operating in the region. Their journey toward safety had revealed that even the most secure communities faced threats that went beyond external enemies, and that true security required constant vigilance against betrayal from those closest to you. The pre-dawn silence at Haven Valley was shattered by air raid sirens as Jake's early warning systems detected massive movement on all approaches to the community, his technical expertise having identified the coordinated assault 3 hours before the enemy forces reached striking distance. "We've got incoming on 6 different vectors," he announced through the emergency communication system, his voice steady despite the magnitude of the threat they faced. "Vehicle columns, foot soldiers, and what looks like siege equipment approaching from every major access route. This isn't a raid, it's a full-scale invasion designed to overwhelm our defenses through sheer numbers." Colonel Harrison's voice echoed through Haven Valley's command center as he coordinated the community's defense, his military experience evident in how quickly he adapted to the multi-front assault that Vincent Cross's organization had planned as retaliation for their leader's capture. "All civilians to designated shelters, defensive teams to assigned positions, and medical personnel prepare for mass casualty situations," he commanded, his authority providing stability in a crisis that threatened to destroy everything the community had built over 18 months of careful planning and cooperative effort. Marcus found himself appointed as Harrison's second-in-command, his combat experience and leadership of the newcomer group having proven his tactical value during the investigation that had exposed the traitor within their ranks. The spy had been revealed as Thomas Mitchell, Haven Valley's former head of security, whose gambling debts and personal grievances had made him vulnerable to Reaper recruitment and manipulation. "Mitchell provided them with everything," Marcus reported grimly, "patrol schedules, weapon inventories, defensive positions, and most critically, the locations of our ammunition supplies and fuel storage facilities." Rebecca, her wounded shoulder immobilized but her tactical mind sharp as ever, coordinated the community's internal security while Haven Valley's regular forces deployed to the perimeter defenses. "We've identified 12 residents who might be Reaper sympathizers or additional security risks," she announced, her police background making her skilled at recognizing behavioral patterns that suggested divided loyalties. "They're in protective custody until this crisis is resolved, because we can't afford to fight external enemies while wondering about threats from within our own walls." Emily transformed Haven Valley's medical center into a battlefield hospital, her surgical experience becoming crucial as the community prepared for casualties that would far exceed anything they'd previously encountered. "I've organized triage stations throughout the complex and trained every available volunteer in basic trauma care," she reported, her professional calm masking deep concerns about their ability to handle the medical crisis that was approaching. "We've got enough supplies for perhaps 50 serious casualties, but if this battle lasts more than a few hours, we'll be operating under field conditions with improvised equipment." Samuel led the technical defense effort, using his engineering expertise to coordinate power systems, communication networks, and mechanical defenses that could multiply their limited manpower against overwhelming enemy numbers. "I've rigged explosive charges on the main access bridges and prepared emergency power shutdowns that will disable non-essential systems while maintaining critical defenses," he explained, his elderly hands working with steady precision despite the pressure. "If we can channel their assault into predetermined killing zones, our defensive advantage might offset their numerical superiority." The battle began before sunrise as Reaper forces launched coordinated attacks designed to stretch Haven Valley's defenses beyond their breaking point, but the community's response demonstrated why organized cooperation had proven more effective than raiders' chaotic aggression. Jake's electronic warfare capabilities disrupted enemy communications while providing real-time intelligence about assault positions and tactical movements. His teenage determination had evolved into genuine expertise that gave Haven Valley crucial advantages in information gathering and technological superiority. David Chin and his family had insisted on contributing to the defense despite their recent arrival and civilian background, with David using his engineering knowledge to identify structural vulnerabilities in the community's defensive positions and recommend reinforcements that could withstand prolonged assault. "The children are in the deepest shelter with other families," he reported to Marcus. "But Lisa and I are helping coordinate supply distribution to defensive positions. We're not fighters, but we're not helpless either, and this community saved our lives when they had every reason to prioritize their own safety." The tide of battle shifted when Marcus implemented a desperate strategy that combined conventional military tactics with the unconventional advantages their diverse group had developed during their journey through the wasteland. Rebecca's police training helped coordinate civilian evacuation procedures, Emily's medical expertise kept critical personnel operational despite injuries, Samuel's engineering knowledge maintained their technological advantages, and Jake's communications mastery enabled coordination between defensive positions that would have been impossible through traditional military channels. The final assault came as Vincent Cross's remaining forces attempted a last-ditch assault on Haven Valley's Central Command facility, believing that capturing or destroying the community's leadership would break organized resistance and allow systematic conquest of the settlement. Marcus led the counterattack that broke this final assault, his experience with desperate situations and improvised tactics proving decisive when conventional military planning reached its limits. The battle's conclusion came not through overwhelming firepower but through the kind of coordinated community effort that had made Haven Valley successful in the first place. As the sun rose over their defended community, Marcus looked out over the aftermath of the battle and realized that they had achieved something greater than mere survival. Haven Valley had evolved from a sanctuary for refugees into a beacon of hope that proved humanity could rebuild civilization through cooperation, mutual support, and shared commitment to values that transcended individual survival. The zombies remained a constant threat in the world beyond their walls, but within Haven Valley, people had created something worth defending, a community where children could grow up safely, where knowledge and skills were valued and preserved, and where the future held promise rather than just fear.